Hi everyone, I'm Benjamin and welcome to my book club. This is my Booktube Newbie video. So it's been about a week since I put up my first video, and just a huge thank you to everyone that's watched them or subscribed so far. The response has been bigger than I ever could have thought of. But I thought it was time that I should do one of these Booktube newbie videos. I was thinking about it at the start, but I wanted to get some actual content up real quick. But now I feel like I really should get it done. So here we go. So for anyone that's not aware, Booktube Newbie Tag videos are videos that new booktubers like to do with just a series of questions, 7 to 12 questions depending on who's running the video, just introducing themselves, their channel, and what they like to read. So I've got them written down here. So let's get to it, shall we? First question is, why did you start the channel? And that's a pretty easy one for me, I think. I've always loved talking about books with people, but none of my friends read as much as I do. I lend them books and then I pester them to ask if they've read them and what they think. But the real crux of it was I was reading Revelation Space by Alistair Reynolds. I've got a review of that up if anyone wants to check it out. But I was about halfway through the book and I was thinking, there's all many different ways this could go, and I really want to talk out my thoughts with someone. I want to sit down with someone else that's up to the same part of the book as I am and say, oh, this just happened. What do you think it could mean? And I thought, well, people do this for shows, right? They do reviews and discussions based on episodes. I was wondering if anyone did it for sort of chapters or segments of books. And I found some, but not very many, and not for a lot of the books that I was excited to read and talk about. So I thought, it's kind of like a book club, a bit different, but that's what I envisioned it as. And so I thought I'd do it myself, So the plan is, along with other BookTube content, I'm going to pick a book, read about 30 odd pages a week, put up a video discussing it. Right now it's probably just me discussing it, but hopefully we get to a point where some people read along with me, or people that have read the book can comment on what they think of my thoughts so far. So we've started that already with The Forge of God by Greg Bear, and I'm really excited, I think, tomorrow to read the next 30 pages and record my video, so we'll see how that goes. So the next two questions are kind of related to that. The first one being, what are some fun, unique things you bring to BookTube? And I think it's that chapter by chapter, sort of 30-page segment read-along series that I'm really excited to do. It's not a traditional book club, but it's what I want to do. It's what I wanted to watch for a long time, so I'm excited to be able to bring something like that to the channel. And what are you most excited for about this new channel? Along with the read-alongs, obviously, just people to talk to about books. I love reading. I love talking about books, but I struggle to find people to talk about it with. So I'd love to interact with people in the comments or on Discords and whatnot, talking about books and just sharing my love for books. Next question. Why do you love reading? I think reading as a form of entertainment gives something that a lot of other media doesn't right now. We're in an era of YouTube shorts and TikToks and instant brain chemical gratification. And it scares me a little bit how easy it is to fall into that trap. So a book really requires you to focus, pay attention, and it's not a fast gratification. You have to work for it. You have to put in the effort and the time. And the more I read, the more I realize that reading is a skill. You can't just pick up any book and read it. When I first started reading heavily again, I picked up some of the big classics and found that they were just smarter than I was at the time. I didn't know how to read well enough. I couldn't read those. So I read because I find it enjoyable. I read because I think it's a great way to keep your brain healthy and in shape. And I think it's a really great way to get away from screens. I work with screens all day. I work in cybersecurity. So I'm on my computer all day. And then afterwards we're watching TV, we're on our phones, we're on our iPads. It's good to be able to just break away, pick up a book and read. What book series got you into reading? So this is hard because I was a big reader when I was a teenager, which I think is common for a lot of us. We read in our teenage years and then drop out of it as we get a bit older, which is exactly what happened to me. I think when I was a teenager, I think Garth Nix was a big thing. was a big author of mine. The Abhorsen series, I think Sabriel, Lyriel, Abhorsen, those 3 books. I remember renting them from the library and devouring them, loving them. Obviously, Harry Potter, I read all of those as a teenager, up to Half-Blood Prince actually, and then I stopped. The Hobbit really ignited a love for fantasy for me as a teenager, which I've lost a bit now as a more adult reader, but I'm trying to get back. As for a book series that got me back into reading, I can't really point to one. No, I can. The Culture series by Ian M. Banks. Listening to those on audiobook on my long drive to work, back when I used to work. I used to work up a mountain, and my drive could be anywhere between 45 minutes and an hour to an hour and a half if traffic was really bad. And I listened to almost all of these books while on that trip. And yeah, they ignited a love for sci-fi in me that I hadn't had before in books. What questions would you ask your favourite booktubers? I actually know this one. I've thought about this a bit. I want to know how many books you're reading at once. I was, for a long time, would just read one book. But then I started doing my drives, and I would also read an audiobook, listen to an audiobook. So then I would have a book and an audiobook going. And now I find I have quite a few going. So currently, I'm reading Forge of God by Greg Bear for the read-along. So I'm reading 30 pages of that a week. So I read that on Sunday or Mondays. So that's sitting on my bedside table. I also have another book going that I read just for me. Right now that's Berserker, which I'm really enjoying, the little short stories. I also normally have an audiobook that's just for me. Right now that's Sphere by Michael Crichton, which is amazing. And I also have an audiobook running that's for me and my wife. We're listening to the Cormoran Strike books on Audible and really enjoying them. So and I sometimes have another book going sometimes I have a short story collection going as well. So anywhere between 4 or 5 books reading at once. And I often have to try and make sure that they're not too similar. So I'd love to know, does anyone else do that? Do people read more books? Do people try and stick to one book? What are the hardest challenges you envision starting this channel? I think that's also an easy one for me to answer. I really worry that part of this channel, trying to keep videos going up regularly, reading might become more of a chore if I don't have something I want to talk about. So that's something I'm going to have to try and watch, because as much as I love this channel, I love the idea of talking to people about books, it's not worth losing that love of books. So if that's how it starts to feel, then I'll start winding down to less videos, or we'll see how it goes. But no fear of that anytime soon. I've got video ideas for months and months and months right now, and I've even got videos already scheduled for the next few weeks, so no fears. When did you start reading? So I started reading as a teenager. My mum was a big reader, and that got me into it. So I read in the school library, read at home, read from the public library. But I started reading again as an adult about 4 years ago, when I realised that despite calling myself a reader and often buying and collecting books, I was only reading 1, maybe 2 books a year. And that disturbed me. So I talk about, and in one of my other videos, about a YouTube video that inspired me. I'll link it in the description. In that video, Tim Urban actually talks about taking the number of books you read every year, timesing that number by the amount of years you have left in your expected lifetime, and deciding for yourself if that number is a good enough number for you, because that's the amount of books you'll read for the rest of your life, and no more. And that shocked me, and from then on I've read at least 50 books a year, and I will continue doing that for as long as I can. Where do you read? Mostly in bed at night, but also on the couch, or we have a nice seat outside. Sometimes I'll take the dog outside and sit in a nice bench out there and read there if the sun's quite nice for it. What kind of books do you read? So I mostly read sci-fi and horror right now. Almost entirely sci-fi and horror. I read a bit of fantasy as a teenager, but now as an adult I've struggled to get excited about fantasy books. I really want to get into some more genres. partly because when I go to like the QBD bookstores, it's a bookstore chain here in Australia. I'm looking for new horror and sci-fi books to read. I've read everything that they've got on the shelves, or if I haven't read it, I've bought it and it's in my TBR. But they've got huge fantasy sections and huge crime thriller sections, and both of those genres feel to me like I should like them, but I struggle to get excited to try. So part of that is this year I'm challenging myself to read 10 fantasy books. The first video of that is going to come out soon. I'm going to read 10 and review 10 fantasy books, and then see how that feels in the genre. And then if it's good, I'll add it to my repertoire. If not, then I've at least given it a try. And then I think next year I'll give crime a go and do the same thing. What does your book collection look like? Well, it looks like this. It looks like this shelf of mostly my sci-fi and horror books. It looks like this shelf of mostly my comics and some Animorph books at the top. I'll do a video talking about Animorphs one day. There's also the manga shelf and the Warhammer shelf, as well as a couple other shelves out in the living room with some books that I thought looked nice on them. As well as just piles of books around the house, obviously. So that's that. That's my Booktuber Newbie Tag channel video. Thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear from you in the comments what you think. I'd love it if you could check out my current read-along. I mentioned it before, Forge of God by Greg Bear. It so far is a really great first contact story, so I'd really love if anyone wanted to check that out with me. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, do all the algorithm stuff. Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here.